Hey everybody, just playing a little NHL in the afternoon. Trying to get the lead here. And there's a whistle. Okay. Today I am going to be talking about Wolfenstein. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but that's standard for me. So, I want to talk about the new Wolfenstein games. Last time I did a little bit of an update thing for my Twitch streams. I actually did land in a game to play on Twitch while I'm waiting to get my new video card for my computer, so I can get XCOM 2, um, the Long War of the Chosen, which I'm actually kind of excited about, but I hate waiting. It's the 16th. I gotta wait till like July 1st to do it, and then like just let me have my. This is what happens when you make a snap decision in the middle of the month, and you don't have the money to fucking do it. Anyway, yeah, it's just a little paw on my coffee mug. It's one of my parents' Lhasa Apso mugs. Whatever. Could be worse. Could be my mom's music mug. I should have that on a stream or a YouTube video one day. it is it is a magnificent mug. Anyway, right, so today, like I said, I want to talk about Wolfenstein. Last time I talked about Halo, which yes, I have seen the new trailer. It doesn't quite blow my theory up, but it indicates that I'm probably not anywhere close to being correct. But that's par for the course for me. Anyway, but I wanted to talk about Wolfenstein. I played the 4 new Wolfenstein games earlier this year, and I was absolutely blown away. Not because they were great games, they were just a blast, but by how fucking deep the game devs and the writers went in on this stuff. And, I'm a World War II historian. I've studied the war from back to front. I don't know if I should call myself a historian. I don't have a degree, but I like just I've studied that war and the Holocaust and the rise of Nazism and what how fascism and now I'm looking at how it relates to today's world. And if you don't recognize the parallels between Nazi Germany and today's world, I don't know what to tell you other than what the fuck do you think the First Order is? Neo-Nazis aren't scary. Yeah, they are. You wanna know why? Because they have the benefit of history, and they still want to murder everyone around. Anyway, but I have a whole other rant about that I won't bore you with today. I might do it later, just because it becomes very manic, and I am very entertaining when I'm manic. To other people. To me, it's a little frightening. And probably to other people. And to my dog. My dog's under the bed. It's probably for the best. Anyway, you ever wonder what your dog thinks? What the fuck? Who is he talking to? What the fuck is he yelling at his computer screen? Why isn't he paying attention to me? Well, that last one may be more what a cat would think, but my parents I own Lasses, so they're pretty much like cats. They ignore me all day and bug me when they want something. Anyway, but there was so much stuff in Wolfenstein. I just I had to break it down, not just mostly for my own head, but and I find this stuff fascinating, and I know that there's a ton of YouTube videos out there, and I'm just like, let's put something pleasant in the world, like why the Wolfenstein games are awesome, instead of the billionth video of why Brie Larson is, I don't know, Satan at this point. Like, you guys, your dick hurts. We get it. You have a small penis. Just live with it and let Brie be a badass superhero that is awesome and that is not going away, no matter how many times you have crying phone calls to Disney. The people on the line don't control casting. Talk to Kevin Feige. record the conversation so he can laugh at you, call you a small dicked asshole, and then I can have a laugh too. Hey, fanboys. Oh, wait. I got another one for you. Want to see them together? Maybe changing? Now they're gonna dance. Did it. Fuck you, you homophobic, misogynistic, racist fuckers. That's good. I'm done for the day. I'm just kidding. But so, little mini rant against the actual Nazis on this platform. Or people who act like Nazis and then get angry when you say something. And anyway, fuck you all. Anyway, so with Wolfenstein, I wanted to, we're gonna start with Old Blood. And I'll start with a little story. Wolfenstein actually kind of holds a special place in my heart because it was my first video game that I can remember playing. I was like 6 or 7 years old. I was born in '87, so I don't know when Wolfenstein came out originally, but I think it was like 92, 93. So it was like I was 6 or 7 years old, and we were visiting a friend of my parents down in Sarnia, and Sarnia, the city that chemicals remembered. Only people who have been to Sarnia will appreciate that joke. What do they put in the water there? I think the better question is what don't they put in the water? Anyway, it's a lovely town that, I've only been there a handful of times, but there's a lot of chemical plants there, or there have been. So, anyway, but we were down in Sarnia, in front of my parents, and my brother and I were bored children. So he did what any sensible person would do. He put my parents' friend, stuck us in front of the computer, booted up Wolfenstein, and just left us there. Now, given, some people, that's a little inappropriate. You gotta remember, graphics back then were not realistic in the slightest sense. Secondly, the monitor, my brother will probably dispute this. I think the monitor was in black and white, and I don't know why. I don't know, it was 93. Didn't we have color monitors at that point? I mean, I'm old. I'm not that fucking old. Now, and my brother and I have ended up getting a hold of a floppy disk. Remember A drives? All you young kids, you don't know the pain of having an A drive that only had 128 megabytes on it. Not even that. And that was all you had. Your porn was nothing but pixels. Blurred out everything, even if it wasn't supposed to. They were terrible times. The hard times, man. Before high-res porn. Anyway. So, like, I don't know why the monitor was black and white. It still bugs me. So, when I got my Xbox One and I started collecting games, and I had a list, and Wolfenstein was definitely on it. And when I finally got to it, I played Old Blood first, which I'm glad that I did, because Old Blood was basically a love letter to the original Escape from Castle Wolfenstein. It was basically retelling the plot with a second half built in. And, first of all, the character of BJ Blazkowicz. Can we all just appreciate the fact that the people making Wolfenstein, even way back in the day, when they needed to pick a hero to go and murder hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of Nazis, they picked a Polish-American Jew who looks more Aryan than the fucking Aryans did. Like, this is fucking awesome. So right off the bat, I'm like, oh, this is good. But then, like, the game had a lot of callbacks, like the fact that BJ didn't have a shirt for over half of it, and we never really got an explanation as to why he didn't have a shirt on. Like, he was thrown in a cell, so they just stripped him down to his skivvies. I don't think much of the Nazis, but why would they want his shirt off? I mean, it was, and I know it's probably, they treated their prisoners like garbage, but I still don't know why he couldn't have found a shirt before he left the castle. He wasn't even wearing shoes half the time. No shirt, no shoes, no service. Doesn't bother B.J. Blazkowicz, apparently. But there were a lot of, like, little Easter eggs and hidden things, and the castle itself was epic, and the sequences are great. It's a fun game. I recommend everybody play, but this isn't a review. But there are 3 things in it that I wanted to point out that were really, like, they were kind of those things that were that were subtle, but when you actually think about it, was great subtext. And subtext is the thing as a writer that you should always be looking for, even if you're not meaning to. The story is paramount. The story matters before anything else. But if you find subtext, you gotta at least look at it. And the first piece of subtext that I really enjoyed was, he had a British friend, Agent Zero. Excuse me. Gonna have a little sip of coffee here. Agent Zero, who was a Brit, and they were captured, and he was being horribly tortured, just horribly tortured. But he wouldn't give up anything, and BJ goes, you're one tough son of a bitch, and he goes, I have a little trick, my friend. This is a terrible accent, I don't care. I have a little trick, my friend. Breathe in, count to full, breathe out, count to full. Breathe in, count to full, breathe out, count to full. And, like, he's like, and that keeps everything steady. And then he of course he's killed. And then BJ, of course, teaches that to Private Wyatt in New Order. But there's a but here. The underlying subtext of that, to me, was British resilience. Because if you know anything about the Brits during that war, the Brits were so stalwart and so unbothered. Like, the keep calm and carry on. That's basically Britain's MO. Especially in wartime. And especially during that war with the Blitz and everything. It's like, stiff upper lip. And, and people think that was a stereotype or an exaggeration. The fact is that was the British attitude. Is we're just going to keep going. In England especially, the Welsh, Scottish, and Irish were all tough in their way. But the English, like, the one thing about the English I can really say that I admire about them is their resilience of just taking whatever is thrown at them and just going with the flow kind of deal. And so, that was the first thing I noticed. And it was very subtle, and it, didn't pertain a lot to the rest of the game, but it was very subtle. But it was very well done. And it was a great way to illustrate it. The character Annette was interesting. And the next thing I want to talk about was the character Annette. Sorry, I just yawned, if you haven't noticed the cut yet. The character of Annette, who was Jewish, right off the bat, you knew that about her. But then when they're on the boat heading into the next town and they're talking, she's making this gift for her friend Katrin, and the gift is very, like, thoughtful, and like it's not a gift just for an ordinary friend. And there's this, like the way she speaks of Katrin. And then there's a few journal entries that you can find where she talks about, nights that they spent together and dancing together and stuff like that, and how she just goes off into the middle of the city in chaos with zombies just to find her friend and rescue her. And you're just, like, automatically, I just went, that's not a friend. That's a lover. They were definitely girlfriends. And at the end of the game, when you're with Fergus, you're in a boat, you're in the river, and you're just going along, and look at the pier, and you see them together, and they're embracing. But if you keep your eyes on it long enough, you notice that they're not hugging; they're kissing. And like that in itself, the fact that they're Jewish is bad enough for the Nazis. But the fact that they're gay, a lot of people don't understand, or they purposely forget, or they just haven't been taught that the Nazis, what they did to the Jews and the Romani and blacks and everyone else was bad. What they did to the gay community, to gay and trans people, was horrifying. Even more so, because the Jews were worked to death, and then they were getting, and then the Holocaust, it was systematic execution. But gays and trans and anybody even remotely queer, they were killed. Or they were experimented on. Not minimizing what happened to everyone else, but the gays in particular were targets for the Nazis because they were obscene, they were perverted, they were aberrations. They especially viewed trans people as abominations that needed to be eradicated. They actually didn't just kill trans people, they tried to erase trans people from history. They destroyed records in German medical institutions from across Europe, destroying records of transgendered people to try to erase them from history. And, people aren't taught that, and they should be. So when we talk about the Nazis' victims, we should be talking about the Jews. We should be talking about the Romani. We should be talking about how they treated blacks. But how they treated the gay community needs to be discussed more. And so for the people at Machine Games making this character gay, and also her being a woman, because the Nazis were like, no, women's roles are in the house and to make babies. That is their only role. They have no other job. And she's in the middle of combat fighting. That's another subversive thing. There's so much about these games that's subversive, but the character of Annette was really, I wish that she had survived into, and I would like to know what happened to her. Other than she met it with Katrin and then they escaped Germany. But she was a fantastic character, and and Katrin was actually supposed to be in the game a little bit more, and if you look at the credits, the voice actor was the same voice actor as Pippa, I think was her name, the British spy that BJ meets up with, and it's the same voice actor, so she probably had a bigger role, but then with this spy's character, they probably just combined. They probably just, decided one's enough. But which is a writing thing, and it happens from time to time. I would have liked to have seen more of her. I would have liked to have seen that relationship, but but to make one of his supporting characters a gay German Jew, a gay Jewish woman. I think she was German. Yeah, probably. It's been a few months. I meant to do this a while back, but circumstances, procrastination, obsession over XCOM. Yeah, that took me away. Anyway. But, and that was another one that just, so good. Just top-notch subtext. Just talking about, how marginalized can we make this character? So, Annette was fantastic, as I said. Just a great character. But the third thing I noticed, was the whole premise of the game was this Helga, I think her name was looking for mystical artifacts and like in mysticism and magic and the whole thing, and then the zombies and the giant monster, and which the original Wolfenstein was very much involved with that, as were the sequels. That is a reference to Hitler and the Nazis' obsessions with Jewish mysticism, the occult, anything of that nature. And like there is like Jewish mysticism is Kabbalah. Remember that thing from like 2 decades ago with Madonna, like Kabbalah, like nobody understand, but Kabbalah was a sect of Judaism that dealt with mysticism, and there's also a Muslim group that's kind of their opposite number. Like they were the mystics, and they're very small percentage of their population, but Hitler and his cronies became obsessed with it and obsessed with the occult, and all these legends and biblical myths. And so if you look at the Nazis and you look at that obsession, why were they so obsessed with the occult? Well, basically they wanted to deify Hitler. They wanted to make him like a god, and they kind of succeeded, but not really. He honestly wanted this idea that the Aryan race was superior. But how do you prove that when human DNA, the mysticism that they went after, the occult stuff, was basically they were trying to create a mythology where, for whatever magic reason, the Aryan race was superior and all other races fell below them. And and that's what with Old Blood, with the search for the mystical stuff and the zombies and the dark, the magic stuff, that was basically using Hitler's obsession with the occult as a story device, which I thought was absolute genius. And they expanded on that. They did that with New Order, New Colossus too, but from a different angle. And so that was something I really appreciated. And people go, wait, so Raiders of the Lost Ark was right? Yeah, actually. Hitler was obsessed with the occult. And and if people are surprised, you realize that Spielberg's Jewish, right? You might know. But anyway, Old Blood was a lot of fun. I only played it the one time because you don't really need to play it to understand the New Order, New Colossus. But when I got to New Order, like, it escalated. Like, the references were even more overt. Because Old Blood was written as a prequel, it was written as a love letter, so they didn't have that much in it that I found to be subversive or, or just deep cuts and stuff like that. But New Order definitely was. And with New Order, there was so much in there, and I'm going to try to break this down as best I can. But I think that one of the major things that New Order depicted quite properly was the indoctrination of the German people to Nazism. How deep it was. We know about Hitler Youth and Gestapo and the Secret Police and all that. What I don't think people quite realize is that it wasn't just the Jews. Now, I mentioned the gay community. I also mentioned the Romani and blacks. But it wasn't just them either. It was everyone that wasn't the picture of Aryan perfection. New Colossus exploited other parts of that, but for New Order, we're just going to focus on a few things. And basically, what happened in Germany, somebody said this in 2017, or 2016, after President Shit for fucks. I don't know, it works. One said that a German person said, yeah, America, now you know what it's like to have 1/3 of the country want to exterminate another third, while the rest of them just sit back and do nothing because, it's not as bad as people think. because they're not going to get harmed by it. First they came for the communists and I did nothing. Like, that poem is basically what happened in Germany. Is they ignored it because it wasn't affecting them, or they couldn't believe what was they didn't want to believe what they knew was true about who the Nazis were, because it was too evil to think it was real. And that's why, good Germans, the ones that weren't necessarily Nazis, they still didn't fight back, because at first they didn't think they had to, and by the time they figured out the reality of their situation, it was too late. They couldn't fight back at that point. And so there's a scene when you're in the sewers, where you overhear a conversation between a husband and wife about how their neighbor was like disappeared one day. That happened on a regular basis. People just disappeared. And the discussion always went, what happened? I don't know. Like, he was, maybe, like, I don't think he was Jewish, like, but, you never know. We never ask. And, God, we better keep our head down. Yeah, we better keep our heads down. Everybody in Germany, by the time the war started, in reality, like, they were so terrified of being carted off by the secret police too. They kept their heads down. And, you can call them cowards, and a lot of them probably were. But you also have to understand that when you have a family, your only thought is, in that situation, your only thought is to protect them. And you will do it, so turning a blind eye to things is natural. You can definitely criticize people for it, but you can't really blame them. Self-preservation is a natural human instinct. But, but New Order did a lot of other stuff, like how they illustrated so many perfect things. Their enemies of the Nazis were degenerates. They were degenerate Jews and degenerate blacks and these vagabonds, like Romani. I'm not going to use the term that's usually used for Romani because it's a racial slur, and I'm not Romani. To any Romani people, you probably know the word that I'm thinking of. I'm not going to say it aloud. I will either say Roma or Romani, and everybody should too. Google the origin of that word. It starts with a G, ends in a Y, Google the origin of that word. It's not endearing at all. And I'm going to talk about the Romani later. But the fact is that the indoctrination wasn't just the Jews were bad. It was everyone who wasn't Aryan was bad. And also it made everyone that wasn't Aryan less than human. Muslims, Jews, Arabians, Mediterranean peoples, blacks, Romani, Asia, so on and so on and so on. They had a fucking hierarchy of races with Aryans at the very top. And basically, that's what, people don't understand. It wasn't that they wanted all the Jews to die. Is the Jews were just the start. And by making people believe, and we see this in Myanmar right now with the persecution of the Rohingya. We see this in China with the persecution of the Uyghurs. We see it in Israel with how Palestinians are treated by the Israeli government. Not the Israeli people at so much, even though there probably are a lot of them who are like that. Otherwise Netanyahu would have gotten in power. But the Israeli government, how they view Palestinians, and frankly, how modern conservatives in the U.S. and Canada and Britain view immigrants of any sort, black people, gay people, or any kind of minority group. They are the other. And I'm not talking about like normal run-of-the-mill conservatives like my dad, or just people who have, politically they align with what I consider to be conservatism, not what it's turned into. I'm talking about people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and people who follow her, and these Republicans who claim to love freedom but don't want to work towards giving it to more people and want to stop you from voting if you don't vote for them. By the way, that's a very Nazi fucking thing to do. You got these people on the far right, and they view people who aren't like them as less, as the other, as degenerates. What is wrong with the Jews? They're a degenerate race. That's what they believed. And the game nails that. They hammer that point home again and again and again and again. But where, like, even in all three games, there's these. You overhear conversations from people about, like, I can't believe these. What's there to resist? I wouldn't kill them for their political opinion. We have a different idea. Yeah, and your different idea is to massacre an entire race of people. But the fact is that all that stuff, like, they normalized what the Nazis did. They normalized hatred. They normalized bigotry. They normalized anti-Semitism where it became acceptable to the common people. So that the common people would not pay attention to what was really fucking happening. And then they spread lies. Jews were stealing from everybody. They were hoarding money. Hoarding their wealth. Like, the dirty Jew with money thing. Like that whole shtick. Romani, they were considered vagabonds. They were thieves and rapists. And, they were, and some were probably fine people. Yeah, there's a reason why Trump's rhetoric sounds so familiar, you fucking idiots. Anyway. Fuck that guy. Alright, but they spread lies about everyone that didn't align with them so that people would not care if they were eliminated. And that's exactly what the Nazis did in reality. And in the game, because the Nazis were at war, they took it like 15 times further, and to the point where everything's being policed, and which was already happening, but now it was happening on a scale that is truly horrifying and that we should be fucking paying attention to, because in some parts of the world it's happening again. I just read up on what's happening in Hungary, so I'm a little upset right now. Regardless, like that was part of the game that I looked at and that I really thought, wow, they did their homework here. And like, and the thing was, like, they controlled all the information. They controlled the news media. If you look at New Colossus, that Johnny Carson ripoff, that was genius. That was just genius. That a talk show host was also a propagandist. Kind of like Sean Hannity. What? No, I don't take it back. Fuck you, Sean Hannity. That's going to be the tagline under my channel. Why not? Anyway, but like, and the whole indoctrination, everything about it was to do with the idea of the master race. I mentioned the occultism. I mentioned, everyone else was degenerate and less than. But, but the thing is, and I mentioned the LGBTQ plus community, but there were other things that were, that were depicted in all the games that, would have been considered bad. Now, for the Romani, people talk about the Holocaust like it was just the Jews. And like I said, it was not. It was not just the Jews. The other group that was persecuted almost as badly, they were put into the same category of the Jews, enemies of the race-based state. I've just got the thing up. For people who don't know who the Romani exactly are, they're nomadic people that originated in northern India. Now northern India is right near Turkey. And, northeastern India, it's right near Turkey. That's why a lot of Indians from that area, they look more like Turks than Indians. And Romani resemble them. And, when they were nomads, they didn't really have a home. They just traveled around in their caravans. They were street performers. I don't know if they called them circuses back then. People called them thieves and vagabonds. And then they claimed, they're rapists. They're, they want to mix with us and take us over. They wanted to replace us. Remember Charlottesville. Jews will not replace us. That still fills me with a white hot rage. People said I was overreacting to Trump being elected, calling him a Hitler stand-in. After Charlottesville, they stopped saying that. And I have never been angrier to be wrong. Or angrier to be right. I have never been more upset at being right about something than I was that day. Except for January 6th. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep my composure, but this is bringing up a lot of memories that just are going to infuriate me. So, anyway, where was I? Right. So, with the Jewish, the stereotypes, the persecution was, they're money grubbing, they're thieves, so on and so forth. They're a lower form of life. With the Romani, it was that they were, they were thieves in the more, the Jewish were stealing money through their banks. The Romani were just stealing, or they were raping, or they were, they were degenerates and vagabonds and all that stuff. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. So when the Nazis started targeting the Jews, they also targeted the Romani. They put them in the same category. And the Romani genocide is not spoken about as much as the Holocaust. Now, it did not have the Romani did not have the numbers that the Jews had in both the genocide and in their populations. But in terms of percentage of their populations, the Romani genocide was one of the most efficient in history. And it has several names. And I'm sorry for to any Romani people who may be watching this, I'm going to butcher the hell out of this. I'm sorry. One is Parajmos, meaning the devouring. The other is the Theragimos. It's a PH, so I'm assuming it's pronounced with an F, which is cutting up, fragmentation, destruction. Makes sense. And the third one is just hitting the nail right on the head and going, and it is called, sorry, I'm trying to read it. Samu Deripin. Again, I'm sorry for butchering this, which means mass killing. At the time, they estimated that the death toll for the Romani, that there were about 1 million Roma in Europe at the time, and about between 220,000 and 500,000 Romani were killed. Ian Hancock, years later, he was a Romani scholar, a political advocate. He was born and raised in England, and he has actually done He has actually done a lot of work. He was on the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council under President Clinton. He was born and raised in England, but he has Romani background, and he has actually represented Romani at the United Nations. And he as you can tell, I'm trying to avoid this. He estimates, through his research, that there were actually 2 million Roma living in Europe at the time. And out of 2 million, 1.5 million were killed. That is 3/4 of their population. And the Romani are a historically marginalized community even to this day. The G word that I mentioned earlier was a slur used on them to dehumanize them. The term for anti-Romani prejudice is anti-Ziganism. And you know, there's a lot more there. I highly recommend people study it, but the Roma were, you know, as I said, 1.5 million. Not as much as 6, but it's still a fucking horrifying number. And in Wolfenstein, they didn't mention Roma by name, really. But in the death camp, the work camp that BJ infiltrates, and then on the submarine, because a lot of the people rescued from that work camp ended up on the sub, in New Colossus, you see people wearing Romani garb, the headscarves, the colorful shirts, and I think that's Romani garb anyway. It looked like it, and that was very subtle of the game devs and all these little, you know, nods to the Romani and how, you know, and they were persecuted by the Nazis as well. And if the Nazis had won the war, there probably wouldn't have been a lot left in Europe. Just like the Jews. They wanted them dead. They wanted them gone. And the next group in line after that were the blacks. Bambate was an African fighter. He grew up in, he was a Namibian, I believe. And, like, for him, I mean, like, you look at how they treated blacks. They basically treated blacks as slave labor. They treated everybody as slave labor, but the blacks were targeted for it. And after the Romani and the Jews were gone, guess who was next? And, you know, and after that, and of course I spoke of the LGBTQ plus community, how they were viewed, how they were basically exterminated, how there was an attempted erasure in medical records of anything related to being queer of any kind. Every single thing the Nazis were and are today, the neo-Nazis, is about preserving the master race, the bloodlines. We have to preserve the bloodlines. You know, you hear white supremacists in the States and white nationalists in the States talk about that. Like the the Confederacy was kind of the same thing. Different ideology a little bit, but, you know, the white supremacy was still there. You know? In actual fact, you know, and I'll get into this when I talk about New Colossus, if you look at turn of the century Jim Crow United States, and then you look at Nazi Germany, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And those two things rhyme better than you would believe. The phrase America First, you know where that fucking came from? America First was a Nazi sympathizer movement in New York in the 30s. They're the ones who threatened Jack Kirby after the creation of Captain America. And then when he came downstairs to beat the shit out of them, they ran. True story. Anyway, but I'm veering a little bit. But and then again, it wasn't just ethnic groups or orientation or identities. Also, disabled people. People with disabilities. If you're in a wheelchair, oh, no, you can't work, you're dead. That scene in Schindler's List, where there was the old man who couldn't really use his hand, so they taped a snow shovel to his arm so he could still work. And they just shot him. Being disabled of any stretch was seen as an imperfection that needed to be eradicated. And the fact that they made Caroline Becker the leader of the Kreisau Circle, the leader of this resistance movement, as a disabled, possibly queer, there are some things that are coded in there, they never said it explicitly, woman who is in a wheelchair. She is the leader of this resistance movement and is, fighting against the Nazis. Like, that was a masterstroke. But, like, the disabled community was horribly targeted by the Nazis because they were imperfect. Also, look at Max. The character Max. Max Haas. Max Haas. It's the Max Haas. Hodor. I am Groot. 3 characters that are also way the fuck smarter than the former president. To be fair, my left testicle's smarter than the former president, but that's another thing. Anyway, I had it IQ tested. He's quite brilliant. Not as smart as my right testicle, but, he also has some deformities, so. Yes, I'm making you imagine my balls. You're welcome. Anyway, Max Haas, he had a dent in his head, and he was oversized, and he was mentally handicapped. And the story of Klaus, of how he was a Nazi, and his wife and he had a child after years of trying, thinking they'd never have kids, to have a child who was born with a clubbed foot. A deformity. He did everything he could to stop it from being reported. Then it was reported, and his child was killed in front of him, and his wife right after her. And he was a card-fucking-carrying member of the Nazi Party. And they still killed his kid for being deformed. And if you don't think the Nazis didn't do that, wake the fuck up, because they did it every fucking day. So when he finds Max, it's the same, like, anything that fucked with the picture of Aryan perfection was eradicated. Literally eradicated. I am using that term literally. And then they destroy medical records of it. And, there are other stuff in there, but I think that there was other stuff, other persecution, but I think that the game really did well on hitting at the Romani, the Jews, blacks, but also especially on LGBTQ+, and, the physically or mentally handicapped persons, because they were the less known targets of the Nazis, and that kind of needs to be talked about more, especially in context of what's happening today, when people with disabilities, LGBTQ+, and people with mental handicaps are being actively targeted by Republicans and conservatives. We need to fucking talk about that. We have people acting like Nazis, and we think it's just, oh, it's fucked up, but, whatever. No. It's fucked up, and we need to do something about it. Stop voting for these fucking people. Anyway. Didn't expect to be as angry during this video. But here we are. Then there's 2 more points for New Order. The first is Anya. I fucking love that character. She is such a I'll actually get into more about her in New Colossus, but I love the idea, that she fed him, she clothed him, because she knew what he was. When BJ was in that, that vegetative state. But also the fact that this was a girl who got who was in a PhD program at 18, who returned home from England because of the war, and who should have been teaching at a university by then, but ended up becoming a nurse to, for her parents, because she didn't want to work for the Nazis. And, and then, for those who haven't played the game, they did a great, spoilers, she gave BJ these tapes for him to listen to from her aunt, which is basically her telling BJ about all the Nazis she's murdered. And it is well worth going out of your way to listen to these. And, then she does say, some of it was me, some of it wasn't, which means there were other stories of women she knew that were doing the same shit. And this is the thing about, people forget about the resistances in Europe, but how many women were in those groups and how many women were, fucking Nazi killers. Anya even had a serial killer name at one point. Just all these inventive ways, and she had to have an abortion, and that's a whole other thing that she chose to have an abortion, which is going to, of course, piss off the pro-life crowd. Have another one. Fuck you, dickheads. Anyway, pro-life people piss me off, but that's another thing. But, but it's just the fact that here's this woman who started when she was a girl, who refused to accept that the Nazis had won. That she was going to just roll over. And another thing, they killed her friend. They killed the first boy she ever loved for not stopping. Or not moving some. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they killed him. For no other reason than he was an inconvenience. She started killing them back. And it just goes to show that you don't fuck with women who are smarter than you and don't give a fuck if you suffer as you die. And I kind of made that up, but I like it. But the thing is people, for people going, who, there were women who were like that. Oh, yes, there were women who were like that. There are documented stories of Nazi killers in the resistances all over Europe, and of girls. There's a few girls, I can't remember, I think they were Polish. They were sisters who, they killed, nobody knows how many men they actually murdered. How many Nazis died by their hands, but it is not a small number. And, there were women like that all over who would seduce these men and then murder them. They killed them, and they try to kill them in a way either they would kill them in a way that would look natural, or they dispose of the bodies, and they were never found, and they were never, the murders were never solved. It was a way of resisting, but for people who didn't know how to fight like soldiers, but knew how to resist. And Anya was a phenomenal character. The fact that she was captured and taken to Death's Head compound by Engel, and you're there to, ostensibly, you're there to save her, and then when you find her, she and Bombate have already broken out of their cell. And they're like, yeah, we thought we were going to have to escape ourselves. Thanks for showing up, man. I mean, we appreciate that you're here, but, we kind of had a handle. And the length she was willing to go to fight the Nazis was really, and that's the thing, is to resist fascism, you have to find a way. She couldn't fight the Nazis openly. So what did she do? She found a way to fight them in the shadows. And when that didn't work anymore, she had to wait patiently for another opportunity. And once BJ woke up, and they linked up with Caroline and Fergus Wyatt and the rest, she had found her way, and now she learned to fight far more in the open, but at the same time she brought all the skills she had with her. One note, there is a really funny scene where you can overhear dialogue. And I highly recommend when you play these games that when you're at your home base or whatever, go around and listen to the conversations, because a lot of them are brilliant. Some of them are a little irritating, but, Anya asked Caroline for firearms training. And Caroline goes, I don't know if you have the stomach for killing. I think you're wrong. Because I didn't know this line of dialogue until my second playthrough. And when I heard it, I went, oh, Caroline, have we got a story for you? Oh, man, what a great character. And I'm going to get into more about her in New Colossus. But, and the final thing, which was actually a really great, underlying theme to the game. The story of the game, for people who are unfamiliar, is that the Nazis got a hold of technology that advanced them by decades, if not centuries ahead of where they were supposed to be, and that's how they beat the Allies. And now we find out through the character of Set, not Seth, it's S-E-T, Set, who was quite interesting and a really good character. Set had explained to them about the diet you should, and the diet you should was basically it was a reference to Kabbalah, which is I think I mentioned it earlier, the mysticism of Judaism, but it was a technology. We do not pray, we invent. And he tells how they're an ancient Jewish sect that invents things, but the act of the invention is the purpose of the invention. They're not to be used necessarily, but it is, hey, I invented this thing, but it might wipe out humanity, so let's lock it in a fucking safe and bury it in the ocean. And yes, there's danger there, but the Nazis discovered one of these repositories of knowledge and started using what they found to create technology that would advance. That's why they were able to colonize the moon the way they did. And, and there was other stuff that went on, but it was really, and now, some would say that this goes against the Nazis in reality, who believe Jewish technology to be subpar and to be actually the lowest form of intellect and so on and so forth. Here's the thing, though. Albert Einstein, theory of relativity, he also worked on the Manhattan Project, and his theories on nuclear power he started them before the Nazis took over Germany. And the Nazis were using some of his work to try to develop nuclear weapons on their own. They were using stolen Jewish technology theories, not at the scale that the game has, to advance themselves. But they were just lying to people about it. And this is actually a common theme with the Nazis, is Hitler himself was half Jewish. His father was Jewish. And, you know, that was part of the psychology behind his hatred of Jews, but his father was not actually a very nice person. You know, I'm not saying that Hitler was mistreated, but the pathology is there. But it was just the fact that they would hide, and people within Hitler's inner circle, they would hide any links to Jewish background that they may have had. And also, you know, anything that happened, they would lie and lie and lie about the Jews. So that even if they come across something good, they have to say, no, we made that. The Jews had nothing to do with it. And then they erase the records and kill all the people that know, and then they're the ones holding all the power. You know, so, and the DAI should also allow the game devs to, you know, have flying saucers in the second game, and you know, and all the different technology, which was great. But that was very much based on the fact that, you know, the Nazis had no problem using Einstein's research so long as Einstein wasn't there. And they probably wanted him dead. They definitely wanted him dead. Einstein was one of the most outspoken Germans against the Nazis, especially after he moved to America. So, you know, they definitely wanted him dead, but they used his technology if it meant winning the war. They just lie about it later and erase the records, because that's the whole point. If you ever read Animal Farm, one of the common themes throughout is that they change the writing of their the pigs who are in charge. They change the writing of their history again and again and again to suit their own needs. And that's what the Nazis did. That's also what Communist Russia did. Communist Russia more resembled fascism than socialism, which really shouldn't surprise you. You know, the Nazis called themselves socialists, which they weren't, but I'll get into that later. You know, but, like, part of how totalitarian authoritarian regimes behave is that they rewrite history for their own ends. So in Wolfenstein, the Nazis found all this technology from a Jewish mystic group, stole it, lied about it, and then used it to advance themselves beyond anything that was known. One little note, though, on Fergus Wyatt, for anybody wondering. I picked Wyatt once, and I regretted it, because Wyatt was a whiny little bitch. Seriously, kid, get over yourself. Then, Fergus. Fergus was just... You want to fight a war against Nazis? You gotta get yourself an angry fucking Scotsman who drinks too much, yells too much, and sounds like he's gonna fucking shit himself 24/7. Ah! I'm gonna fucking kill his Nazis. I can't do the accent. I can't do the accent on a whim like that. But anyway, Fergus was awesome. Wyatt bothered me. Wyatt could be funny, but only when he was a drug addict. Which, yeah. Anyway. The whole arm thing with Fergus was fucking hilarious. I might go into that a little later. But... Tekla, and Max Haas may have been on the autistic range, actually, now that I think about it. But Tekla especially was, you know, that form of, you know, autism really is a spectrum. And so Max could definitely have that, you know, he could be autistic, you know, it was just a form of autism. The only thing is the dent in his head. That might have something to do with it. But I don't know. They never really explained, what his deal was. But autism definitely could be a possibility there. Um, and again, he would have been killed, and so would Tekla. And Tekla had the more, one of the traits of autism is the eye. Is they'll have one eye that's kind of moves independently. Very rare cases. And she, constantly worried about numbers, and which is an autistic trait, and calculating things, and there's all this stuff. But and if things are disturbed, it's they their brains can't handle it, right? It's a different way of viewing the world that we have to be more understanding. I am probably being insensitive right now because I'm not educated on autism the way I should be. And so to any autistics out there, I'm deeply sorry if I've hurt you in any way. But, Max, there was a scene with Max where he, where like when you use the buzzsaw on the little, like to get the mold, right? Uses the buzzsaw and Max freaks out because of a loud noise. That is a symptom of autism. And with Tekla, with the constant numbers and the constant talking, and that is another symptom of it. And I thought that was brilliant. And it did a pretty good job. Probably not perfect, but they at least tried. And again, the Nazis would have killed both of them. And that's another reason why I go with Fergus as opposed to Wyatt. Because the black kid with the Jimi Hendrix stuff, he was cool. Don't get me wrong. But Tekla was something else. Tekla was a lot of fun. And the way she went out as a hero. And, like giving BJ the time he needed kind of deal. Which I thought was really special. And the way how patient BJ was with her and how understanding he was with Max, as opposed to the Nazi ideal that people like them were less than human and should be exterminated. There's a lot of strong messaging in Wolfenstein New Order. But then in New Colossus, the messaging just... New Colossus was even more so. Like, they save BJ, and he's basically crippled by everything, and he's dying. His kidneys are shutting down. And I do want to point out, at the beginning of the game, one of my favorite bits I've ever seen in a video game, is Set. And Set was exceptionally Jewish in this game. The first game, he had the accent and kind of the same. The second game, he was so fucking Jewish. It was amazing. Like, the accent, the shuffling around, the constant complaining. Like, every stereotype you could find of a Jewish old man, they put it in him. It was awesome. I love every second. But at the beginning of the game, he has these traps set up that, like, blow people up using electricity and magnetism and stuff. Him and BJ are fucking talking. And in the background, all you see are Nazis running around the corner, all blowing up. And then there's this one guy. He's kind of like, okay. I'm just gonna see. He's like sneaking by, and then he's like, if I walk on my tiptoes, maybe I won't die. Whoever directed that scene, I fucking love you. I've never laughed so hard at a video game in my life. There's the guy tiptoeing. Oh, man. But anyway, there were a lot of stuff in... Old Blood had some good stuff. New Order was great, but New Colossus took it to a whole nother fucking level. Like, one of the things was how they dealt with the women and pregnancy and motherhood. The fact that Anya was pregnant, at least 4 or 5 months pregnant. Actually, I think 6, 7 months by the end of the game. and she was still running around with an assault rifle, still doing missions, still in the thick of it, like, which completely goes against even modern times the perception of what pregnant women should be. And the whole idea today, and it is fucking gross, is that when a woman becomes pregnant, she becomes completely invalid. She has to sit at home and be safe and not do anything. And now, should Anya have been running around with an assault rifle, possibly getting injured? Maybe not. But if a pregnant woman has an AK-47 and she wants to do something, you fucking let her do it. Which is probably why she got away with it. But also, the whole bit, like the whole thing was, pregnant women are just as capable of doing things as when they're not pregnant. Is there a little bit of risk? Sure. But that doesn't mean they should just lie in a bed and be immobile for the 9 months. It is a Western idea to do that because of the deeply ingrained misogyny within Western culture, and that's a whole other discussion. But the fact that they had a pregnant woman in this game running around, killing Nazis without her shirt on, play the game, it's kind of a disturbing scene, but awesome at the same time. And, you know, like the fact that, you know, she still, you know, wanted to fight and wanted to help and did not want to give up. And she never gave up on him once, even when he had his fucking head chopped off. That was one of the craziest things I've ever seen in a video game. But when you have magic Jewish technology to draw upon, no wonder Marjorie Taylor Greene believes in Jewish space lasers. Wolfenstein had a guy get a new body. Oh, these games are so ridiculous, it's awesome. But you could not do this as a TV show or a movie. I never want this to be a TV show or a movie, because it's so ridiculous people would not be able to accept it. But for a video game, it's fucking possible, right? Like, it only works in a video game. In my opinion, at least. But I think one of the swallowing my own hair, or dog hair probably, but like Anya doing all that and her determination, and also one of the best jokes I've ever heard in a game. William, I can't do the Polish accent, so I'm not going to try. I don't know whether or not it's the pregnancy or anything, but I'm feeling excited, you know? Like we need to talk when we get back to the ship. Oh God. Is everyone on this channel? Yes. Yes. Back sauce. I'm probably butchering it, but I love Bombatier. Yes. It's like, go on. But that's the thing, is they made it, like, they had it there, but they didn't harp on it, but they just depicted her as just doing whatever. You know, oh, she's pregnant, that means she has to sit down. No, it doesn't. Pregnant women can still do stuff. I know she's problematic, but Scarlett Johansson, she was pregnant during the filming of Age of Ultron, and she continued to work out, she continued to do her own stunts. Now, her capture and stuff may have been Joss Whedon being a prick, which, given recent revelations about him, I wouldn't be surprised. It may have been a forced rewrite from Disney, who, at the time, you had Ike Perlmutter being a complete and total jackass. That's another long rant that I'm not going to get into. But she was still doing stuff. She was still, like, in the thick doing the stunts. Halle Berry had actually was pregnant during the filming of X-Men Days of Future Past, which is why her role was so reduced. The original script, apparently, and Bryan Singer's a pedophile, fuck him, but he had actually written her far more in the film than she got, but then she was, like, 5-6 months pregnant, so, and they didn't have somebody to stand in. They could have hired a stunt double, but she still did all that stuff on her own. She still kept in shape. Gal Gadot, excuse me, for Wonder Woman, she had to do reshoots while 6-7 months pregnant and still doing all that stuff. And so pregnant women can do things. They don't have to just sit there and be pregnant for the 9 months. And the game was sending a pretty clear message about that. And then with Grace, the fact that she started breastfeeding in front of BJ, and BJ just very politely turned his head and until the baby was latched, and then he went back. Now, I don't think she should have been smoking, but it was the 60s, and everybody smoked while they were doing anything in the 60s. They're good. These cigarettes are good for you, kids. Anyway. No, seriously, they marketed them to children. What the fuck do you think Joe Camel was? Anyway, but Grace, and that segues me to Grace, another fantastic character, this very proud black woman, with the fro, and she has all these they all look like Black Panthers, which was not by accident, but I was a little confused, because that's more 70s and 60s, but it's a video game, so who the fuck cares? Or was it the 60s? I don't know. And if black historians can correct me, I would very much appreciate it. And I apologize for being an ignorant white jackass. I feel like I should say that after every sentence, but, I don't know. But I think we'd all agree it's better if I just do it once. Anyway, but she was a fantastic character. That she just, just took over. And there were people who were like, why did she just take over? Why did she just come in and take over? Because she could. But it was also the fact that people thought she was arrogant, she was a bitch, or something like that, which a lot of the people who were saying that were guys, who just are afraid of strong black women who don't give a fuck about what they think. And she just was, this unapologetic, black woman who just, she didn't care. Like, she was just gonna hammer every single point. Calling Sigrun, I'm going to get into Sigrun in a bit, but calling Sigrun a Nazi. Saying well, no, she helped it. No, she's a Nazi. Why is she here? And because she wasn't there when Sigrun helped them at the beginning of the game. So, to her, Sigrun is unproven. And she was also, the whole scene was very brilliantly played out, but, Sigrun was... And again, I'll talk about Sigrun later. But with Grace, wanting to nuke them, it's well, we're using a nuclear weapon. It's just like, fuck it, we have it. They already nuked us. This is our response. And because she was, in the game story, Manhattan was nuked, and she was there when it happened. And there's other, she has this whole gaggle of black girls who are all hackers. And remember, technology has jumped a couple of decades in some places and a century or two in other places. But the fact that... And, Grace was so much fun. In just this real headstrong. But then, the whole listen to black women, it's become kind of a trope now. But it's true. Black women... Trevor knows this, American black women never fucking waste their vote. Because they, people who have been oppressed know not to waste their chance to change things. And for Grace, her attitude was, okay, you want to start a revolution? Let's fucking do it. But also, she was upfront and honest with BJ. And this is going to be a segue to another thing that I thought the game did exceptionally well, which was paint the parallels between American racism and German Nazism. Because, like I said earlier, if you look at Jim Crow laws from the turn of the 20th century, and then you look at Nazi Germany, there are a lot of parallels. The Nazis, there was even a point in time where Americans were saluting like this, the Roman salute. The Nazis took that. They learned a lot of their shit from turn of the century U.S. And and that was a time period when white Southerners were reestablishing their power, and white supremacists evolved and adapted to regain control. And John Oliver did a wonderful piece on it. Go to your search bar once you're done here and type in John Oliver American History. Watch it. It is fascinating. And being a Canadian, we probably have some shit in there that we should be looking at, especially given the revelations about the residential schools recently, which really, for those of us who know anything about them, isn't really shocking, but it is still horrifying. It was cultural genocide that turned into actual genocide. White people, we're just dicks. Anyway, but the fact that, she goes, who took over in the South? The Ku Klux motherfucking Klan. And that's exactly what would have happened. That's exactly what happened is the Klan and Neo-Confederates, they would have signed up with the Nazis. BJ's father started ratting people out because to him, the Nazis were right. And and BJ's father being so anti-Semitic and being furious that his son would dare to be friends with a black girl. I mean, that was born straight. There were probably a lot of Americans that had parents like that at that time and that still have parents like that. Or Americans that are like that to their kids right now. You shouldn't be allowed to have children, but there it is. And, there's a line in one of the scenes with his father, all the Jews and blacks and queers, and, because that was the attitude. They agree, like, anti-Semitism and anti-black racism, of course, has been, seeped into American society, but there were Nazi sympathizer groups in the U.S., even after the war. Fascism was already in the United States back then. It just wasn't as prominent and it didn't have any power. Now, it does, and it's fucking terrifying, which is probably why the game developers included it. And they also, like, one line in particular was a letter or something of the, the KKK. And the whole thing that, hey, look, I know these Nazis are socialists. Okay. No, they're not. You don't know what that word means. And you really need to stop using it. And also, take off your white hood. I want to see your face as I break every fucking one of your teeth. Fuck you, goddamn racist pigs. Anyway. But the thing is and that is a common refrain of the right. People talk about socialism. Oh, the socialists the Nazis were socialists. No, they weren't. It was Nazi. It was the National Socialist Party, Nazi for short, but they were not socialists. They just used the name to appeal to more people. Kind of like the People's Republic of China or the Democratic Republic of North Korea. Like, you can put a name on something all you want. It doesn't make it what it is. The Nazis were not socialists. They were fascists. Socialism is not fascism. And I do not have time to get into the differences. I am not going to litigate that. I'm not a fucking lunatic. But just flat out, people need to be educated on what the word socialism actually means. But because of people like Joe McCartney and the anti-communist 50s and 60s, socialism became dirty in American politics, especially in the South among the racist white. And the racists, and so the KKK saying, yeah, we gotta fight again, they may be socialists, but they got the right idea about the blacks. That was basically their attitude. And we saw that with Charlottesville. When you saw Nazi flags, Confederate flags, and KKK flags all together, like, yeah, they want the same things. So of course the KKK would take over the South when the Nazis moved in. Of course they would do this. Of course they would go along with it. You know, and some people, and when like white America just gave up, and BG goes, I don't believe it. No, they gave up, and that's the thing. Is that if the Nazis had come to America, yes, they would have fought back, but if the war turned against them, a lot of Americans would have laid down their arms and said, look, it's not worth fighting them anymore. They're just other people. Let's bring our boys home. And there were people who were advocating that in the U.S. during the war. Appease the Nazis. Meanwhile, 6 million Jews were being exterminated. 1.5 million Romani were being murdered. Hundreds of thousands of gay and trans people were being butchered. And they said, we need to bring our boys home. This isn't our concern. Fuck you. Humanity should be your fucking concern. Oh, sorry. I know I should stop apologizing for it, but I really don't mean to go off on these tangents. But there were other things in New Colossus that were just amazing. Like, just absolutely brilliant. You know, they explored Max in a lot more detail to, you know, where, yeah, you could only say Max Haas or whatever, but he was a savant. His art, the one that I said, this is exceptional, Max, and she just sat there and looked at it. She was an art major. And then, you know, this stuff with, you know, Bombatier teaching him pool. And he started doing trick shots on his own. Just amazing, like, savant stuff. Beating Set at chess. Like, that is incredible stuff. But it was done to illustrate that just because his brain, you know, like, oh, well, he's autistic or he has mental handicap. Just because that is true does not mean he is not capable of doing things. And the crew except for Set a little bit, the crew treated him as an equal. They treated him as an equal member of the crew and anyone else. And it was, you know, it was genius to me. It was absolutely genius. You know, like, in Max, the whole idea of him was great. But again, the Nazis would have just killed him. And all that potential, all that savant-like genius that he had about certain things would have been lost, and because he was not the picture of Aryan perfection. And the same can be said of Sigrun. The fact that she was a plus-size girl, or thick, as the kids would say. You dang kids! I'm 34. By the time this is posted, I'll be 34. You know. Oh, I feel like an old man. It's a good thing I don't watch much music anymore. Well, to be fair, is there any music on Much Music? Not much. If any at all. But with Sigrun, because of her, just the way her body was, it again attacks, by the character's creation, attacks the idea of, you know, the whole Nazi perfection. Like, the perfect Aryan specimen. Not overweight. Not, you know, there's certain weight, certain color, everything. And because she wasn't that, her mother was incredibly abusive. And there were probably a lot of German mothers who are like that to their overweight children. You know, overweight. I'm trying to think of a better way. Plus size is pretty good. I'll just keep using that. And Sigrun's, and also that she had a diary full of sexual stuff. which again was another, thing of Nazi, is that sex was for procreation. And if you thought about sex, especially if you thought about sex, like that was where their hatred of of gay and lesbians was, because you're thinking about sex with the same gender, there's something wrong with you, and and it's perverted, it's disgusting, and intermixing of races was strictly for him. So her having sex with Bombatier was, like that alone would have been, like would have sent her mother into a blind rage. By the way, I love that scene. They open the submarine door, they're having sex. Oh! Do you need to use the submarine? Yes, motherfucker! And Grace is just like, yeah, kinda. Like, why are you doing this in here? You both have rooms. But Segrun was interested, and, Bombatier being the pig that he, and he kind of didn't understand how naive she was when he slept with her and everything else. Bombatier was also an interesting character, not as as detailed, but the fact that he lost his family, and he keeps laughing and smiling, because if he stops, he'll have to think about what he's lost, and that is actually a common trait among depressed people, is we think about what we've lost, we think about what we've done wrong or what we could have done better, and if we don't distract ourselves, those thoughts will eat at us forever. And but Bombatier was actually really cool. I'd like to see more of him. And Segrun, though, what was so fascinating about her was that she never really truly believed in the Nazism and what it was. There was a conversation to her Anya, where Anya was pretty harsh with her for not fighting back and not wanting to disappoint her mother. And Anya said something, but I really wish that BJ could have interceded there and said, look, when you have a parent like that, everything in your head is, I don't want to disappoint them. So you try to do what they want you to do, but when you know it's wrong, it's hard, but you also don't know how to stand up to it. And, people with abusive parents can tell you that. And so Segrun was stuck, and, and the whole thing with Grace continually calling her a Nazi, that is another thing that happens even to this day, where people use the words German and Nazi interchangeably. And like in comedians make jokes, like Stephen Colbert, Seth Meyers, they make jokes about Nazi, about Germany when they criticized Trump, or they, Germany, you're too racist for Germany. And I'm sitting, and German people in the comments are like, hey, what the fuck? Have we not done enough? And the thing is, if you look at Nazi Germany, America could learn a thing or two. The aftermath, when the Nazis were defeated, especially in East and West Germany, there were laws put in place to make sure that A, Hitler was never glorified and the Nazis were remembered for what they were. These was genocidal maniacs. And B, that they would never be forgotten what happened. What Germany did. There are pictures, there are still photographs inside movie theaters where they had all the newsreels in Germany of soldiers, German soldiers, not SS, but regular German army, watching footage of the death camps. You don't have to see the images that they're being shown to know how horrifying they are, because you can read their expressions. You can see their horror and the realization, I fought for that. I fought and bled for that. That is what a lot of Germans had to grapple with at the end of the war. And they had to basically stand up and go, okay, you know what? We did these things, and we need to make sure that we never do them again. And if you look at Germany, how they're educated, that kids are taken to Auschwitz or other camps as children. And like one German described actually in the American History YouTube video that I mentioned earlier from last week tonight, a German actually said, I have stood in one of the gas chambers in Auschwitz. or one of the camps, and I've held the rags that is the only thing left. And when you do that, it's very hard to ignore the reality of what my country did. And I was so taken aback by it, because in Canada we're not taught things like how the residential schools, we're not taught about that, and we need to be. In the US, they're not taught about slavery the way that they should be. They're not taught about the history of white supremacy in America as they should be. In Germany, they teach it all. Okay? They don't spare anything. They teach in school, they teach about the war and the Holocaust. They tell the fucking truth. And the truth is that Germany, under the regime of the Nazis, committed an atrocity after atrocity. They didn't just commit one. The truth is that Germany committed atrocities. And that those atrocities need to be recognized. They need to be taught, and they need to remember what has done so that it doesn't happen again. Are there neo-Nazis in Germany? Yes. But they are mostly uneducated, fringe of society types that make up a very small percentage of their population. But if you look at German laws, images of Hitler are banned unless in historical context. Images of the Nazi flags or any flag of the Third Reich or any symbols of the Third Reich are explicitly banned. Any statues have been put in museums or destroyed. Any phrases like blood and soil or Sieg Heil or Heil Hitler, they are banned. The salute is banned. And Holocaust denial is illegal. It's illegal in France as well, and a lot of countries in Europe have it. The flags, the symbols, like, you will go to jail. Like, Holocaust denial, you will go to jail. You know, and it doesn't just go... And then tourists, like, you know, they do fashion... If you do that salute in a public place and the police catch you, you're going to jail. You use those phrases, you're going to jail. After everybody in the bar beats the fuck out of you, and that has happened. People, drunk-ass morons, I don't want to say Americans, because I don't know if they're American or not. Probably. Let's face it, probably. Walks in and yells, Sieg Heil! A bunch of Germans beat the shit out of him and threw him out of the bar. He's lucky he had any teeth left. He's lucky he didn't kill him. And so with Sigrun, with Grace continually calling her a Nazi after she betrayed her mother and left the Nazis and joined the Krauss Circle and was trying to do anything she could to help. And for Grace to continually call her a Nazi and dismiss her and tell her to fuck off or anything like that. Was insulting. And it is something that happens to this day when people talk about Germany, and Germans, quite frankly, are understandably sick of it. So when Sigrun grabs Grace, smacks her, grabs her by the throat, and just starts screaming, like, that's probably how a lot of Germans feel when people keep calling them Nazis. And, you know, and then, but it also may have been Grace fucking with her to get her to stand up for herself. Because she, you know, it's just kind of things that, you know, because there's a thing with the grenade earlier in the game that I thought was great. I do want to sidebar, I just thought of it. I don't have it written down, but the whole Aunt Roswell thing, where they integrated that into it, that was awesome. That was absolutely brilliant. There were times where I think BJ could have just very calmly said, okay, look, there's Jewish technology, you know, the Daishu and you know, and the Jewish technology and that stuff. Would you have believed it? No, but it would have been fun. Uh, and I talked about it, and finally, two more people on Horton, this Southern style preacher, sort of, complete socialist, anti-government. They send you boys over to fight. We were starting a civil rights movement right here in New Orleans. And the thing is, there were civil rights groups in the South before the 1960s. You just didn't hear about them. The civil rights movement was longer, messier, and frankly bloodier than history teaches. I was going to say most historians, but I shouldn't say that. But the fact is that Horton was great. Like the whole political debate with him and BJ of, how like extreme left or like, military wars, that. And then BJ's like, yeah, but when the Nazis started killing people, we had to do something. What were we supposed to do? Just sit on our asses? And, and the whole thing, and, and just this redneck white Southerner with that accent, and the clarinet player, the blues guy, the sniper, like the whole thing, and also the black characters were depicted really well in this game, which I was happy to see. But like the whole, and the fact that, and here another little thing about New Orleans, it was used as a ghetto. If you know anything about the history of the slave trade, or if you've played Assassin's Creed Liberation, New Orleans was one of the biggest fucking slave ports in the U.S. So, yeah, it's a little on the nose to put the ghetto that they're going to stick all their political prisoners in New Orleans, a former slave port, but you know what? It works. It absolutely works. But I think one of the biggest... Sorry, I was trying to keep my thoughts straight. And, and of course, we have to talk about Engel. I mean, Death's Head was awesome. He was an awesome villain, but you also didn't see him much. Engel, in our New Order, she was there a little bit, but Engel, especially New Colossus, when she cuts off Caroline's head and she starts like playing with the head. I mean, just like, it's horrifying. There's no redeeming qualities, and the whole obsession she had with BJ when they find the ring, the wedding ring, and and all that. Just this, and then she's being interviewed by the Johnny Carson ripoff and is gleefully recounting the story about she killed B.J. Blazkowicz, and just an absolutely fantastic villain. And there's even a scene in New Order where, like, I was a good German woman, I had my 4 children, but now I serve in my way. And again, it was that thing of that German women were just for producing babies. But she, like, she rose through the ranks as well. And that was the thing, is like, people think that when it comes to these groups that it's just the men. No. There are women, like the women, German women back then were just as indoctrinated and just as in on it as the men were. Like in the South, like you see the people in the KKK, oh my God, they're married? And I went, yeah, because their wives are just as bad. And there's a longer conversation about sexism and misogyny and racism and how they're tied together, but it's neither here nor there right now. But the fact is that New Colossus broke so much convention, but they were just so subversive, and sometimes they didn't even fucking hide it. They just came out right out and said it about the Nazis, and there were so many little things, little references. One in particular that I will mention was that The film director in when he has to go to Venus and impersonate an actor and shit. She was based on an actual German filmmaker who was basically Hitler's favorite propagandist. And the scene with Hitler was fucking nuts because it was, Hitler had syphilis. If he hadn't killed himself, he was already going insane. But if he had lived for another 20 years, he would have been off his fucking rocker into a fucking swamp, man. Like he was just like the whole sequence. I've only ever watched it once because I can't deal with images of Hitler where I don't get to shoot him. And I was very disappointed that I didn't get to kill Hitler. Hopefully in Wolfenstein 3, I will get to kill Hitler multiple times. Come on. Let me kill Hitler! Anyway. But the scenes were brilliant. And just the... and that little thing with Terror Billy, like, talking about how he was a mongrel because his mother had been Jewish... And how he was degenerate. He was a cold-blooded killer and a rapist. This, all the lies, all the propaganda about him to make him this boogeyman. So the people would be happy when he died. That was a common technique of fascists as well. And of anything, like when even today, like George Floyd. They tried to paint him as some career criminal. Or there were others that had like criminal records. It doesn't matter if they had criminal records. It matters that the fact that the cops killed them when they didn't have to. And they did it because they were black. And you can argue all you fucking want. But when you dehumanize people and turn them into something less than, and then you accuse them of being criminals and disruptors and everything, which the Nazis did with so many groups, then it's easier for the people to stomach their deaths, torture, or mutilations. And that's the thing that they were doing with BJ, is they were trying to turn him into this mythical creature that then Hitler slew, or Hitler by proxy slew. And it was genius. It was absolute genius. And the whole thing that Hitler had started making movies, that was a reference not just to the fact that he was a failed artist and author, but also to the fact that Kim Jong-il did it first. Kim Jong-il had two of South Korea's, or actually, I think it was either South Korean or they're Japanese, a number of actors kidnapped and forced them to make movies for him, including Pogasari, which is known as North Korea's Godzilla, for decades. Not decades, for years. In years, they were forced to make these films for Kim Jong-il. And eventually they did escape. But that was a direct reference. So again, whoever, like the writing team and the development team for Wolfenstein really did just a phenomenal job. All these references to modern times, all these references to back then, and the direct correlations that we see between them. And part of history is connecting the past to the present. And not enough historians do a good job of that. And, and a final point, I did mention BJ's father a little earlier. And BJ's father saying, no one has suffered like I've suffered. That is, like white fragility, is they think that setbacks or losses due to their own stupidity is suffering, when it's not. It's not suffering at all. But they blame everybody else. And to get ahead, they have to fuck everybody else over until there's no one left, and they can just hoard all the wealth and all the property and then say, see, I built it myself. And you want to know who that sounds like? You probably already guessed, but Donald fucking Trump. The guy who's declared bankruptcy 6 times, the guy who has had failed business, who lost $1 billion over the course of a period of time, and who cheats everybody, who fucks over everybody around him, who will not pay people, and anybody who criticizes him is an enemy, and that he is suffering despite the fact that he was the president and wealthy and all this shit. Whoever wrote BJ's dad, bless your heart, you hit the nail on the head. Fucking God, you hit the nail on the head. And playing that game in 2021, that was something else. Like, yeah. But, New Colossus and the ending, the whole... I like the speech without Wyatt. Wyatt was a little more, hopeful, but the speech with, this white southern preacher guy and a black lady from New York and and all this stuff and the whole thing with Fergus during the mid-credits scene where he's yelling at Scotland. Scotland! That was awesome. But that whole speech was just this, this call to arms. And the thing is, to Nazi sympathizers, it would seem as a threat. And that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the third game. Finishing off here, I know this is a long video. And I'm recording it. It's at 2 hours and 4 minutes. I'm probably I don't know how much I've been able to cut it down. Very quickly, I'm going to touch on Youngblood. Youngblood is set in the 80s, which is its own delight, with all the techno music and all the not techno, but do 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 do. Take on Me. What was that? Aha. Yeah, Aha. Yeah, it was Aha. But you have this really fun game set in the 80s, set in Paris, and people. Now I want to address criticisms because they're stupid. Number one, people said, why did they change Wolfenstein? Why did it have him work? Why did they change? It's not about BJ, it's about his daughters. It's a co-op, They have this art, it sucks, this sucks. It wasn't designed as a sequel, you fucking idiots. It was designed, along with the VR game they did, it was designed purely as a side game to advance the timeline, number one, introduce his daughters, number two, and also just use that world for another adventure. And it was a co-op game because it was designed to be a co-op game. It wasn't designed to be Wolfenstein 3. It was designed to tell that story, to tell the story of his daughters, because they're probably going to be two of the main protagonists of Wolfenstein 3, along with BJ and Anya. Can you say 4-person co-op? And their daughters were great, and they talked like 80s teen girls, which I just loved. So with Youngblood, they also introduced Abigail, or reintroduced her, because she was a baby in Wolfenstein 2. And then Sophia and Jessica. And number one, I delight at the idea of a Nazi regime being brought down by 3 teenage girls. That is just fucking delightful. I want that to happen. But also, Abigail not caring, and the whole thing of their first kill, their reaction to their first kill, where they kind of started vomiting, okay, we're happy we killed a Nazi, but fuck, and how their hands were shaking, because you never know what you're capable of until you do it. But also the way that Anya and BJ were training them. Anya training, this is how to get us. And that's the thing, that's something we teach kids in karate. When you're tired is when you lose. That's why you have to push through the pain. And I love how they would swear in Polish in their mother language. And yet Grace shows up and curses like there's no fucking tomorrow. And I love the girls, and they were fun. I liked the game. I'm sorry, guys. For the people who didn't like it, but it was fun. It was fun to play, and there was also a lot of other stuff in there. Like they're in the ghetto and they're talking about all these people. Why didn't they just kill them? Why didn't they just round them up and kill them? I don't ever kill people for political differences. These are degenerates, and that's the language that the Nazis use. And actually, that's the language that neo-Nazis and neo-Confederates use, and the language of, like that one racist-ass sheriff in Kenosha that wanted to warehouse black teens. Literally, look that up. Google Kenosha sheriff. Yeah, nice guy. And then the motherfucker had the audacity to kneel in solidarity with Black Lives Matter last year. You can't talk about warehousing black people and leaving them to die and then kneel in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, motherfucker. Go to hell. Anyway, but the fact is, and they had all, the experimentations again, all the experiments on people, the zero empathy for any prisoner because they were less than human. And, the depiction of the ghetto was very accurate. The depiction of how, these, the prisons and everything else. But probably one of the things that struck home with me was the fact that they talked about the rest of the world being in apathy, which is what is happening now. We had a fascist prick sitting in the Oval Office. I don't care what anybody says. Donald Trump was a fascist pig, and we had him sitting in the office. You had an avowed white supremacist, Stephen Miller, working in the White House for 4 fucking years. You have actual Nazis running for government positions. Maybe they're not winning. You have people like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene who are QAnon supporters in fucking government. You have people like Tom Cotton. By the way, anybody else see the irony that the most racist senator's last name is Cotton? Saying that if we teach kids critical race theory, the school should lose funding. Like, there are people like that in government in the US and in Canada, because Aaron O'Toole might try to hide it a little better than most, but he's a fucking racist. Maxime Bernier, who was arrested recently. I'm sorry, but I hate Nazis. Anyway, Maxime Bernier. Like, he was kicked out of the Conservative Party for being a racist piece of shit. Like, Boris Johnson has said disgusting things. But people just go, well, they're conservatives, that's the way they are. Okay, then don't fucking vote for them. Well, but what about the economy? Okay, number one, the economies do better under liberal governments and have consistently for the past 40 years. Number two, I think human rights are a little more fucking important than the fucking economy, you fucking asshole. Ah! I maybe should have broken this up into parts. Anyway, I'm not cutting that because I'm proud of myself. The fact is that, the world of Wolfenstein by Youngblood is that they're in complete apathy. Europe is still under Nazi control and the rest of the world just doesn't give a shit. But that's exactly what would happen because it's happening now. Look at what's happening in China. How many people actually give a shit about the Uyghurs in Tibet? How many people give a shit about the Rohingya in Myanmar? Or, frankly, what the Australians did to their indigenous, what Canada and the US has done to their indigenous, all this colonialization and oppression, and, even things like Puerto Rico, they're basically a colony with no rights. They don't have proper voting rights. And whenever there's a push to give them proper voting rights, Republicans claim that Democrats are trying to rig the system. That's fucking Nazi shit. The whataboutism that Fox News does on a regular basis, that's a Soviet propaganda technique. But people don't care because, hey, it doesn't affect me. It fucking will affect you, asshole. First they came for the communists and I did nothing. There's a reason that poem is still read today, because people said, hey, it's not affecting me, until they were the one loaded on the train too. The January 6th riots. I'm trying not to lose my temper again. I watched that from here, from my home in Canada. Okay? They stormed the capital of the United States. They vandalized it. They killed multiple police officers. They injured dozens upon dozens of people. And an attempted coup in service to a man who had fucking instigated it and pretty much told them to do it. And now people are like, let's just move on. No! Because it failed doesn't matter. In reality. Hitler failed in Munich, the beer hall incident. He was thrown in jail. Then he was released, and then he made his way into government and said, hey. He's learned his lesson, Susan Collins. Let's just let him do his thing. And then he became the chancellor. Do you really want Donald Trump back in the White House in 4 years? The apathy that is shown in today's politics towards fascism is the apathy that was depicted in Wolfenstein Youngblood, that the rest of the world did not fucking care. And that it'll take a calamity, a world-ending calamity, to bring them out of apathy, when it should not take that. So Youngblood, I actually love it. I love it. And the character Juju was good too, because she was a French aristocrat who became a Nazi sympathizer, who married a Nazi, and who bought into it. And the thing is, that didn't happen. Yeah, it did. There were a lot of French aristocrats, or people from the oldest French families, that may have lost shit when the French Revolution and everything else, that they wanted to remain superior. So they just went along with the Nazis, said welcome in, and that's what Juju was depicting. Also, I do want to point out, she was almost offensively French. Hello, girls. Do you want some wine and cigarettes? Okay. And all the, all the, don't, and all the way she would talk, it was actually genius. Like, they really wrote her exceptionally well. And, and then with BJ, the scene with BJ where explains stuff, but that was, again, an overarching message, is that no matter, like, the way that Anya was in New Colossus, she wouldn't give up on BJ, that BJ would not give up a New Order, and that the girls would not give up in Youngblood, and even when their father was very despondent about it. The point of all that is that when it comes to fascism, you can't just stop fighting. You have to continue no matter how bleak it gets. And that is a message that people should be paying more attention to today, but they're not, because they don't think it can happen here. Well, guess what? It can. It nearly did. So wake the fuck up. You shouldn't need a guy on the internet screaming about a video game to tell you that there is a danger of fascism in North America right now, in both Canada and the US. The US is a little more urgent, that we need to fucking deal with, or it's going to happen again. And if you say I'm overreacting, fuck you. The one thing that I was reminded of playing Wolfenstein was how much I've studied World War II, how much I've studied the Holocaust, and the one thing that made it all possible, and not just what the Germans did, what the Italians did, what Mussolini's fascist government did, what Imperial Japan did, Google the rape of Nanjing, what they did to Korea. What the Russians, what the Soviets did for decades on end. What's happening in Hungary and the Philippines and Brazil right now with fascist governments. What's happening in China, in Myanmar, in Venezuela, all these things. Yes, there are root causes. But fascism didn't die with the Nazis. It just evolved. And if we are apathetic towards it, it will happen again. And Canada and the US, especially America, is primed for it because of the history of white supremacy here. And by not paying attention to history, we are dooming ourselves to repeat it. So the Wolfenstein games should, like, everybody should play these games and then do the research behind it, because there is shit in them, so much that needs to be taught and needs to be spoken about and needs to be put at the forefront of the history of that war. We can't just talk about D-Day and Iwo Jima and the atomic bombs and Pearl Harbor and, and Stalingrad. That's all important. You have to talk about why the war went that way, what the Nazis were doing, and why it needed to be fought. And we don't do that enough. We also have to talk about the harsh reality of the Holocaust and that it wasn't just the Jews who were persecuted. And we have to talk about how, after the war, with the Nuremberg trials, yes, a lot of Nazis were executed at Nuremberg. But a lot of them weren't. This is a true story that a lot of Canadians don't know. My dad's home unit, the 1st Hussars, here in London, Ontario. They have a date in their history called Black Tuesday. It was a small town. It was about a week or so after Normandy, after they landed. They were separated from their infantry again, and they wound up in this small town in France. They are ambushed by an SS division. 2 guys made it out. Anybody else who survived the firefight was rounded up, and they were executed one at a time. The colonel in command of that unit, of that division, that SS division, the SS colonel, he was tried with war crimes, but he was not sentenced to death, and they released him from prison. And there were multiple attempts by the Canadian military to get him back in jail. And they were ignored. I don't know where he ended up. He's probably dead by now, hopefully. Not enough was done to deal with the Nazis. So many were not persecuted, prosecuted. A lot of them were executed. Some of them were locked away, but a lot of them weren't. Now, regular German army, you can make arguments for. The SS, they were true fucking believers. The Gestapo, they were true fucking believers. They should not have been allowed to what? They should not have been allowed to walk free. And they were. And they ran off to Argentina and Paraguay and other places. These people participated gleefully and willfully in a regime that is responsible for millions upon millions of deaths. From the Holocaust to the war itself. How many people in history are dead because of Adolf Hitler? How many people followed him? How many true believers were there? How many are out there now, living lives of peace? Remembering the good old days when they were in charge. We find them every once in a while. I read a Twitter thread a few years back, I wish I could find it, but a lady who, she had found this little German restaurant. Had all the pictures of military and German and celebrating Germany. The couple that ran it were these nice old people. And her boss, who there's a longer story there. She took it was something, they were celebrating something, and she and a bunch of her coworkers, including her boss, went to this restaurant. He was a Marine, retired Marine. And he looked around, and because he had also studied the war, something wasn't quite right. The pictures on the walls, the paraphernalia. It wasn't just images of the war. It was glorifying the Nazis. And he confronted the store owner. He got into an argument, tried to deny it. He kept pushing. Finally, the wife came screaming out of the kitchen saying, "You don't know what the Jews did to us." This nice little old couple were Nazis that fled to America, running this little restaurant, and no one knew. That is why fascism is allowed to continue. It's because, and I'm not saying we need to round them all up and kill them. I am not advocating that. I'm saying that when we do not properly prosecute atrocities like this, like the January 6th riots, we give the opportunity for it to happen again. And it will happen again if it is not dealt with. The Nuremberg trials eliminated a lot of Nazis. But the other war crimes trials, they let a lot of them go. And that's how fascism has been able to continue now. Right to the Oval Office. Sebastian Gorka, one of Trump's advisors for the first 2 years, he was born in England, but he educated himself in Hungary. He doesn't have a PhD, by the way. He just calls himself doctor to make himself look smart. And he's also a fucking idiot. He on Inauguration Day, Trump's Inauguration Day, he wore the regalia of the Order of Vitesse, which is a neo-Nazi group in Hungary. Stephen Miller is a disgusting pig of a human, and he was writing U.S. policy. The shit at the border, I'm not saying that immigration in the U.S. wasn't fucked up before Trump, but Stephen Miller made it worse. And that's what these games have done. the message that Machine Head is trying to send is that we can't just think they're gone because they're not on TV every day, or that we defeated them. Fighting fascism has to be a constant vigil. And as fun as the games were, and as much as you've seen me laughing, you've seen me upset, you've seen me doing this. If there's one message to take away, is that we can't just ignore stuff like this. We can't just go, oh well, it happened, but it's over now. It's not over until the people responsible are brought to justice. Until the people responsible are held up as examples of why it can't happen again. That somebody like Donald Trump is still walking around after stoking violence, inciting a coup, and being responsible for atrocities being committed in the name of the American people. The fact that he's walked around Mar-a-Lago scot-free, that doesn't sit well with me, and it shouldn't sit well with you. I remember the Richard Spencer and his neo-Nazi guys got really upset at Wolfenstein for the messaging they had in the game. And to them I say, you're Nazis. Shut the fuck up. But the fact is Richard Spencer is still walking around spreading his hate. David Duke has a podcast. Tucker Carlson is on TV every single night. Fox News promotes this shit. Newsmax and OAN are going even further. Fascism never left. It just evolved. Just like American racism and white supremacy after the Civil War, it didn't disappear, it evolved. It adapted. And we can't just sit and let it happen. So like BJ and Anya and Bombatier, Sigrun, Grace, their kids, anybody else in those games. Fergus with his crazy fucking arm, which by the way, absolutely awesome. I love how the arm would just like, is subconscious, like grab the woman's tit or give someone the finger. It was good shit. By the way, there's a little scene, like he's asleep in his room, like he's like over on his desk, and his alarm's going off, and the arm detaches itself, crawls over, turns off the alarm, and then crawls back. And what the fuck was that? You ever see the movie Idle Hands? That's a fucked up film, by the way. One of those late 90s, early 2000s teen horror films that are more funny than anything else. But anyway, now where is the series going? I don't know. There hasn't been an announcement. Everybody expected there to be something at E3. I haven't heard anything. But here's what I think, and I'll be very brief about this. The third game, I believe, what they're going to do is they're going to start with the death of Hitler. The B.J. Blazkowicz killed Hitler. They're going to start with that. And then they're going to fast forward to the future with, the stuff that they established in Youngblood, where now the kids are taking up the fight. And the kids are taking up the fight. And Hitler returns, but it's Cyber Hitler, which was actually a boss in the game, in the original games. And that's going to be like the next, and then his defeat, and they're going to have to solve something, and it is what it is. It will be interesting. I don't want to say anything definite because really I know nothing. But if there's any indication, Wolfenstein 3 is going to be exactly as amazing as the first two and Youngblood and Old Blood were. This is a great franchise. Machine Head's done a fucking great job. I know that this video was kind of all over the place at times. I'm ADHD. It's the nature of the beast. If you can make sense of it, awesome. If you can't, I don't know, watch it 5 times. And then send me money. Seriously, I need income. I need to get out of my parents' house. The walls are closing in. How are you dealing with the pandemic? I'm not really doing anything different. I'm still stuck in my house. But anyway, but in conclusion, to Machine Head and Bethesda, all the people involved, thank you for fucking Wolfenstein. Thank you for these games. I can't wait to see what's next. For the people watching who, things got a little uncomfortable, but it's an uncomfortable subject that we need to talk about. It's an uncomfortable subject that we can't ignore, especially right now. So, to the people who made these games, to Machine Head and everybody else, keep pushing the envelope. Keep bringing this shit up. Never stop bringing this shit up. Just keep going with it, because until, as a society, we actually deal with this shit properly, we need to keep talking about it. So, so again, just these are amazing games. Check them out if you haven't already. Machine Head, best of luck on Wolfenstein 3 whenever it comes. I hope it's not too far away. And for everybody watching, if you hung in for the whole video, I'm sorry. And you need psychological help, and I probably do too, but I know that. But thank you for hanging in there. Please like and subscribe and all that. Share with your friends, your family, your enemies, especially your enemies. Tie them to a chair and make them listen to me rant for an hour and a half. Or actually, right now the count is 2.5 hours. I don't know how much this is going to get cut down, so we'll see. But I might be back with another video. I've got a couple of stories I want to tell that are just funny for me, and also one's a little gross, but to me it's one of the funniest things that ever happened to me. But until next time, I want everybody to keep safe. I got my second Pfizer shot a little while ago, I got my first Pfizer shot. I'm waiting for word of my second shot. Please get yourselves vaccinated. If you're not vaccinated, don't be an asshole about it, but keep washing your hands, keep wearing masks, keep social distancing. We're light at the end of the tunnel here, guys. We got to keep it together. But until next time, everybody take care, and remember, punching Nazis is good for your skin. Seriously. If you punch Nazis, you'll have clear skin. I look like this because there's no Nazis for me to punch. It's really sad. If someone could find me some, I would really like for my skin to clear up a little bit. Hey, I'm not saying that that's true. All I'm saying is that we should experiment and find out. Catch you later, everybody. Peace out.